is already enjoying everything there is to offer from Microsoft Teams? Okay, and then who's like brand new, haven't installed it yet, but your company's kind of thinking about it and you want to make sure that you kind of know what's going to happen? Okay, awesome, awesome. So the whole idea for this session actually came about when I was at the SharePoint conference last year. And I happened to be working the booth for Microsoft as one of the MVPs and, was lined up with other people from Microsoft and able to work the booth and talk about Teams. And the question that I kept getting asked over and over and over and over again, and realizing that we were, a year ago, is, that Microsoft Teams thing, it looks really cool, it sounds really cool, everybody's talking about it, it's the coolest, newest thing, but how do you get started with it? And so this session actually came out of some of those questions that I was being asked at that booth, and so hopefully we'll answer that question today and give you some real practical use cases for Teams. And all of these are ones that I have actually used. These are some of my setups, okay? So we'll talk through all of the little differences in some of the ways that we can set this up. Okay, cool stuff? All right, so my name is Liz Sundet, and I work as a Premier Field Engineer for Microsoft. And my job is a little bit different from a regular Premier Field Engineer in that I get to work on only Office 365 technologies. I have a SharePoint background, been working with SharePoint since about 2006, 2007 timeframe, and took my career and my journey into working with SharePoint and then eventually working for Microsoft. And so I run a Office 365 pod. I work with a couple of other engineers that are on the major workloads, and we work with a bunch of different customers. So very happy to be here. I was a member of the community for a long time prior to joining Microsoft. So I have a great relationship with a lot of people in the communities and get to travel a lot to different places doing these kinds of events. So my next up is actually going to Europe and then to London after that. So just in the next couple of weeks. So awesome, awesome stuff. And Microsoft allows me to do that and work at the same time. It's kind of a great trade-off for me. So the picture of the organ is actually me in Arnhem, Netherlands. If you've never been there, it's a wonderful, wonderful place. And I got to speak in that room in the Netherlands. So it's beautiful, yeah. So let's go through just a little bit with Teams. I want to give you an introduction as far as, how Teams works and all of those kinds of things, and just what I call a little bit of a primer. And then go through some of my uses, the use cases that I am familiar with because of how I have set things up. It's going to be a little bit different for how you want to work with Teams, and that's okay. All right, that's up to you, and it's up to how your team wants to work in terms of the channels and some of the bots that you set up or some of the apps that you set up. Okay, that's all up to you. It's a very agile framework, and you can make advantage of that. But these are just some examples of how I set it up, and there might be different use cases, and that's okay. All right, just kind of some examples. And then I'll end with, kind of questions on what do you want to know? All right? Sound good? Awesome. Okay. So let's go through an overview of Teams. If someone were to ask you, what is Teams, what would you tell them? Chat-based workspace, yes. The what?
The hub for all your tools.
The hub for all of your tools. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay. That's exactly kind of what it is, right? It's chat-based workspace is part of it. Okay. The hub for all of our tools. It's kind of that one-stop shop that you can get into. Okay, and go forward with. And you have this persistent chat. You have this nice place that allows you to work seamlessly across many different applications, right? So I spend probably 98% of my day in Microsoft Teams now, right? I have email open. It's closed usually most of the day. I'm not looking at it all day, okay? I'm doing chats. I'm doing messages. I'm doing meetings within Teams. If I'm building a document that I'm wanting to share and post that to a place that my team can look at, am I going to SharePoint anymore? Not really. I'm technically going to SharePoint through Teams because it's connected and I don't have to search for any of that area that I need to go into and have those URLs highlighted any longer. It's right there. And I can switch between all of the different teams that I work with at Microsoft, and believe me, I got a lot of them that I've been working with. Okay, so that's kind of what that Teams is. All right, so in terms of what to do first in Microsoft Teams, the first things to do is start with a chat. Okay, connect from anywhere, go big, customize your channels, add apps to channels, consolidate some of that need-to-know content into one area, spotlight your resources, elevate email conversations, share content from other services, and help foster active channels. Down at the very bottom of this, if you go to aka.ms, Teams User Quick Start, you can get this actual slide, this documentation here, okay? So you can download that PDF, right? And that gives you some food for thought when you go back to work and able to see that and share it with others in your organizations. Okay, this is kind of the first 10 things to do, all right? So, in terms of the use cases, there's also use cases that are laid out by Microsoft, and they go through all of the different areas, different departments. How those different departments want to work and function is supported by using Microsoft Teams. Okay, so in terms of customer support, it might be a little bit different than engineering or finance or sales, all right? Some terms, project management is going to be a little bit different than some of the other areas. Okay, so I'll let you get a shot of that, hopefully. I wish I had a pause button. But all of these resources, again, are available on Fast Track Productivity Library as well. Okay, so if you've never gone to any of the Fast Track, you can find these resources right in Fast Track as well. Okay, so I'm gonna explore some of these just a little bit further, and we're gonna start with chatting. Who is my chat person? My chat person over here? Yeah. We're gonna actually start with chatting with groups of other people, okay? Maybe from different countries, maybe from, within our own team. I work remote, okay? Who here works remote? Couple people. I work remote, which means I am in yoga pants and a t-shirt all day long and sit in front of my computer in my home office, which is, basement bedroom, okay? My dog guards the house while I am sitting working, and I literally have no idea if somebody has come into my house or not, up until the point where my husband kind of taps me on the shoulder and goes, hey, we're leaving now, or, I gotta go do this, go to run this errand. So I am literally on some type of chat or some type of phone call pretty much every single day with people all over the country, okay? And really all over the world, if I look at, setting it up with friends and that type of thing. And this allows me to do this. Teams allows us to do this. So our first use case, and I write these very much in, our use case cards or personas. As a member of a team, I want to create a meeting space to be able to work with others, to be able to collaborate for some ideas and for some solutions. All right, so this is an example of how we collaborate. Okay, we turn our videos on. Video is great to be able to get a sense of what is happening within the other people's that we can't necessarily see. Okay? We talk on the phone, and I remember back when I was probably in kindergarten or first grade, there came this big announcement out that, you know, we would actually be talking to people via like a television screen one day while we were on the phone. And I remember thinking, oh, okay, that's kind of a big pipe dream. Little did I know that I would be able to see that, and little did I know that, gosh, guess what? We don't have phones anymore, right? We make our phone calls via our computers now, right? Teams with Skype allows us to be able to do this, and allows us to be able to do this seamlessly. I have been on many, many calls, and every single day works great, right? There's functionality that's hidden within the call itself that you can then, you know, take a look at if you want to like maybe blur the background, okay? Announcement just from a couple of months ago was to have a custom background, okay? So I could literally, if I was sitting on a beach taking a call, I don't know why you'd want to, but if I was sitting on a beach taking a call, I could pretend like I was in my office and showed my office background. Okay. Now I want the Snapchat filter where it actually like does my hair, puts makeup on, makes me look presentable, have, you know, not the whole, you know, kind of loungewear, kind of grunge wear thing going, but actually, you know, put me in a nice professional dress. Okay. That's what I want. You think that's coming anytime soon? It'd be kind of cool though, right? Yeah. So what you do is you start a meeting and you have the tools that work seamlessly with, say, your Exchange calendar. If you're already Exchange online, it will work so that you can set up a meeting, set up a Teams meeting, and be able to see your meetings right from within Teams. So I don't have to go to my Outlook and open up my meeting and get in that way. I can go right from the Teams area, highlight that meeting, and get on that call. All right, now, you might recognize a couple of people from within this picture. This is Tracy Vanderschiff. She's also known as Not Liz. Okay, I'm known as Not Tracy. She's from South Africa. So about once a quarter or so, we get on a call like this. And it's just to support other people that maybe we have a meeting like this or a conference that we go to and just want to all sit on a video conference call. And we can get ideas around maybe finding some solution or finding some, you know, things that we can do in Office 365. So this is a great way to really, really collaborate, but not only that, but to be able to see each other. And there's power in that. Yes, we can talk on the phone, but it helps to build trust. It helps to build that relationship when we can actually see each other's faces. And we can pick up on some of those nonverbals very much like we are talking directly to them. Okay, so that's really kind of one of those areas that you can start with, especially if you've got, you know, the capabilities to be able to go into Teams using Skype and be able to just set up those meetings. Okay, so start with that. So some things to do. So set up a team. Okay, you have to have a team first. Right? The teams do not have to be, all of the members do not have to be in that same team as far as the organization. Okay? You can invite guests outside of your organization to be part of that team. Okay? You can also invite users that maybe are outside of your organization completely that you don't necessarily want to have as part of that team, you know, and seeing all of the functionality behind it, but yet get on a call, you can send them a link and be able to see the link and click into that link, and then they can just be on that call with you. Okay? They don't get to see any of the conversations that you're having. They don't see the files in any of the channels. They just are on that call with you. Okay? So decide on a meeting time. You set up the meeting just like you would in Outlook. If you forget to invite someone, you can give them guest access. Just give them that link, and they can join that anonymously. Okay? You can share presentations from within that, take some meeting notes, have some fun, connect with each other, be productive, and then you can also record the call for later if you need to. all from right within Teams. All right, so that's the first use case there. Yes, question?
Recording. Can everyone record, or is it like in Skype where you need to give them access to record?
Yeah, so it would be not the anonymous people that you would have in there, but anybody that is either a team member or a guest that is in that team would be able to record and get that recording, yes. Okay? Planning an event. Who here plans any events? Conferences, picnics for your company, any of those kinds of things? Couple people? Okay? It can even be like a marketing event. So customer that I was working with one day, they had some type of an event that they did year over year. Okay? And it was a couple months worth of work that they would set up to be able to plan that event. And they would do it year over year. Okay? So they had a whole bunch of materials that they would use, and then the next year, maybe it was a slightly different team or the same team, and they would keep those materials available and just set up a new channel to plan the next year's event. Okay, so that might be one idea that you can do as far as around planning events. So as an organizer of an event, I want to be able to invite other organizers to be able to plan a successful event for my company. All right, now, I have planned many SharePoint Saturdays. Who here has been to a SharePoint Saturday? Okay, few people. Who doesn't know anything about SharePoint Saturdays? Oh, okay. So if you want a free event, free, 100% free, in your area, okay, every single state puts out SharePoint Saturdays, or a lot of the major cities, maybe not every single state. I haven't seen one in Iowa yet. Sorry if anyone's from Iowa. But they put out these free events around a major city, and it's called a SharePoint Saturday. There was a community booth in the expo hall talking about SharePoint Saturdays, but otherwise, if you want to, go to spsevents.org and find out where the next event is located near you. Okay, so I was planning SharePoint Saturdays. I planned SharePoint Saturday for Denver, Colorado, for Los Angeles, and for San Diego, California. Okay, so planning an event. Last year, I was actually doing this for SharePoint Saturday in Denver, and we had a few different areas that we wanted to highlight, a few different areas that were considered channels areas, because we actually assigned that channel then to one of those team members that was responsible for all of the organization around that, the aspects in that channel. So things like speaker dinner, who the speakers were going to be. Was there a theme of the SharePoint Saturday in Denver? Who were the sponsors and all of the sponsor contracts that go into planning a SharePoint Saturday? So we set it up very much like we had separate channels. Okay? Now, if I was going to do this again, I would probably say, hey, let's set up, instead of having those separate channels, because yeah, there's a decent amount of information, but guess what? We're wanting to plan another SharePoint Saturday there, keep what we have here. Let's do the channels in a little bit of a different way. Let's have a channel for 2018, then a channel for 2019, then a channel for going forward into 2020 and beyond. And have one place for all those files for that particular year, but then I have the ability to look back on some of the other years and see what's changed or what we can reuse as the asset. Okay? So there's a lot of people that will set that up that way in order to take advantage of that and keep it as almost a document repository of all of the stuff that went on in that project. Okay? So those are a couple of ideas around setting up an event there. Some things to do when you're setting up an event. Set up the team, first of all, for the event. Again, it can be others outside of your organization. My tenant that you saw in the picture there, it was a one-person organization. Everybody else had guest access. Okay? So not a big deal there. Invite the other organizers. Set up the main items. Okay? And this is where I would say work with whatever that team is that you're working with to do this event or any of these setups, any of these scenarios that we're talking about today. Work with the team and what they want. Okay? In terms of the channels, in terms of where the files are located, or even in terms of what apps you use. Okay? Work with that team. It should be a collaborative effort. It's not just collaborative on the back end, it should be a collaborative effort to set up the team. All right? So, set up the channels, use files for things like budgets, for the contract, for the work, maybe for the schedule. Okay? You can use things like Planner or Trello or Canvo. All of these are applications or apps that you can add in that allows you to lightly project manage the work that is being done within that team. Okay? And it's available to you right from within Teams. You don't have to go anyplace else, sign in anywhere else, go outside of the team. You can do that right from within that team. Okay? Anybody ever used Planner or Trello before? Okay, few of us, all right. You know, I like it for project management simply because it is very lightweight, but it lends itself very nicely to some of the agile framework where I've just got a couple of buckets to be able to see what I'm doing, but also to be able to see what everybody else is doing, that transparency. And we'll talk about that in a little bit later when we talk about project setup. Okay? And then one of my great tips is to @mention people. So you'll see in this that I've actually @mentioned a few people here, okay? So that they can see, they get a notification when I've @mentioned them. So make sure that you take use of that @mentioning of people because they'll get a notification, they'll get like that email that says, hey, somebody's trying to reach you in Microsoft Teams. So even if you're not on that particular team, maybe not on that tenant, maybe not even have Teams open. Maybe you've got it on your phone and you're working with it that way. You'll get that notification that says, hey, somebody's trying to reach you. Okay? @mention the people. It works really, really nicely just to get somebody's attention and draw their attention. All right, in terms of projects, who here works with projects? Yeah, we're an IT people, right? Everybody works with projects. Yeah, so I've actually been a project manager for a long time, and one of the things that I like to do is I like to have that, you know, that space to set up tasks for my team, be able to work productively, and have everyone know what each other is doing. I worked for a company as a consultant in Columbus, Ohio. I live in Minnesota. Okay, so it wasn't like it was a short drive away for me to go to work, right? They wanted me on site every week. We kind of scaled that back to about every other week for me to allow some remote time and allow some balance and flexibility. And one of the things as we got rolling into the SharePoint migration was that I found that, you know, we've got this nice Scrum board, but I can't see anything that's on it while I'm not there. Okay, so before Teams, but how do we work through that? Okay, is it a SharePoint list and we kind of do the same thing in a SharePoint list? Didn't work quite as well. Okay, I didn't see that transparency. I could not have the vision into what everybody else was working on. And even though we had daily stand-up calls in very much of that Scrum or Agile framework, it was difficult for me to really understand what everybody else was working on or what their difficulties were unless I was directly on site. So I had kind of that gap week where it was a little bit more difficult for me. Okay? And I had to reach out to a few different team members and say, hey, can you take a picture? Can you show me a video of what's on the Scrum board so I can, you know, pick one of the cards off of the Scrum board? Because everybody else was co-located except for me. Okay? So that was one of the hard aspects that I'm so thankful that Teams has really solved in making some tools available so that I don't have to have that insight or have somebody take a picture. Okay? I can put it out on Teams and it's electronically available. That means that I've got transparency. If we're all using it correctly, I've got transparency into what everybody else is doing on that project. And I can help and add value by picking the next card or picking a card that I can work on remotely, that I don't have to be in the same co-located space any longer. Okay? So things like using Planner, things like using Trello really helps me to be able to do that, and just taking and very much of a Scrum Agile framework and being able to move those cards from the to-do, the doing, and the done. Okay. Any questions around that? All right. So things to do when setting up a project. I would look at create a team for each project that you have out there, and then set up those stakeholders that are from the company. Okay, so some people ask me, they say, oh, well, do we have like this big PMO of all of our projects, and then each of those projects would get a channel? I'd probably set it up a little bit different, and I would set up a team for each of those projects that you're working on, because they're going to use those channels for different reasons, and maybe different, there might be different work streams that they're working on within that project. There might be different deliverables that they want to highlight. Okay? There might be different gates that they want to use to set up those channels with. Yes, did you have a question?
Yeah, can you provision a team with a template so that you have repeatability between similar sets?
So the question is, can you set up a team with a template so that you have the same kind of channel information across every single site? Is that what I'm hearing? Not that I know of right now. It might be something that's out on a user voice or those kinds of forums, but I wouldn't recommend that either, simply because it should be up to that team and that project team to be able to decide how they want to work and interact with the collaboration tools that you're making available to them. So have them set up those channels. Okay? Have them set up what the files are, what those, maybe what those applications are that they would need. Okay? And be able to use that, especially the owner around that, and then the owner work with those team members. Okay? So I wouldn't recommend that, as far as a template. Okay? So upload project documents to the different channels. You'd have channels for, maybe planning, maybe budget, analytics, reviews, feedback, whatever the case may be, and whatever you need within that team for that project. And then pin relevant apps that are used by your team, okay, such as that Planner, the Trello, Smart Sheets, Power BI. There's a lot of different apps that are available right now, either Microsoft-owned products as well as third-party applications, if your organization has that opened to any of those third-party applications. Okay, set up the connectors for things like bots, process automation, and then schedule and hold any of the recurring meetings that you need, or any impromptu meetings. So one of the nice things is I can be chatting with someone in a team and decide, you know what, I'm sick and tired of typing, I'm just gonna call this person. And you can be right within that conversation, not have to go look up a phone number, not have to go look up a profile, any of that. I'm just gonna hit the call button and it automatically calls that person for me. So what we do at Microsoft quite often is when we make a connection with someone, we'll start it over chat. We'll say, hey, because even though their status indicator is green, I'm not sure if they're doing something else at that point in time. Or it might be that their status indicator is red and gosh, I know that they're busy, but they might be able to answer me, I'm not sure. So I'll send them just a quick little what we call ping, okay? Some other people will use the word ping, okay? Just ping me when you're done, all right? So you literally send the word ping to someone. And that means, hey, I'm just trying to reach out and connect with you. And then we'll ask, hey, you got time to chat? Can I call you? And what this does is it allows me to give me a little bit of time to get my headset connected, maybe have to turn it on, initiate some of the Bluetooth settings, all of that type of stuff, but allows me to give it a little bit of time to prepare to, yes, I can take that call, okay? And then make that connection, all right? So, in terms of using Teams for partners, I've seen this used very, very effectively in terms of, all of the different partners. All of the different partners would then be in different channels. Or you could set it up where you've got different partners for each of the different teams because of the ways that we're wanting to communicate with those partners, having them, maybe add in some meetings or some files and actually setting them up as part of that team itself. Okay, so in terms of working with them, it just depends on how you want to share. If you want to share different documents, if you want them part of that network, or if you just wanting to have them set up as one team and then different channels for all the different partners that you're managing more from an internal perspective. Okay, so a couple of different cases there around working with partners. The one that I picked here was as a partner manager, I want to be able to connect with my partners, meaning external connection to those partners, and make sure they have all of the available resources to help them sell products and services on my behalf. All right, so I'm actually wanting to share information with them. In this particular case, I would set up a team for each of those different partners and be able to manage all of those documents through the SharePoint side, okay, and allow them to connect to those pieces of information and sources of information so that they can really self-serve. I don't have to send them emails, right? They're going and they're pulling the information for themselves when they need it, right? So the things to do here, set up a team for each one of those partners, set up maybe different channels, things like conversations, things like events that I might have a partner event, or different campaigns that I'm wanting to showcase, and different information around those campaigns. Use files area for your sales and marketing slicks, your data sheets, whatever the case may be, that they can then go and self-pull, and I don't have to do much work as far as managing all of that admin stuff. Use Power BI graphics. Vendors love that Power BI graphics. The partners love that type of stuff to see kind of how they're performing or maybe how they're being paid. Okay, so you can actually connect some Power BI graphics to show some value-added items to those partners. And then schedule and hold your meetings within teams for maybe individual updates, or if you're managing a set of partners, to be able to have kind of that partner network or partner event. All right, yes, question?
If you invite external partners to your own tenant, it's quite easy. But if you're a member of many other team's tenants, it's just a hassle switching in between.
Yes, absolutely.
So,
you feel my pain.
moving forward on making it easier to just switch between tenants.
So what I have done, it's a little bit of a workaround, but what I have done is I've actually opened up a private browser and had kind of a different way of getting into that team and using the browser-based so that I'm not going away from my own tenant, my own team that I'm working with, but yet I've got access to be able to see and look into some of the other teams that I'm part of. Okay, and not only that, but I've got, not only having to switch tenants, but I've got a number of profiles. So I've got a Microsoft profile, I've got my own profile, and I've got a profile for education. Okay, so this makes it a little bit easier for me to not have to only switch tenants because I'm part of different teams, but also to be able to switch some of those profiles that I might have set up. Okay, that's a workaround at this point, yes. I'm not sure if any of that is on the roadmap at all or not. I know that there's a lot of user voices around that, and so I can't say for certain if they're working around that or not. Okay. Yep. All right. This example is actually not mine. I'm going to be fully transparent here. This is an example that I was talking to one of my customers with, and he talked about it in such a way that I was like, wow, this is really, really cool. And I never thought of this really as a team, but it really is a team and how we kind of define teams. So as an administrative assistant, I want to be able to have a continuous conversation with the executive that I work with every single day to make sure that we're on the same page. Okay? The executive travels probably 90% of the time. The administrative assistant was in the office every single day and would call his cell phone, text him, all of these types of things, and whatever way possible to get in touch with this person, right? So that executive is typically on their phone, right? And not in front of a computer necessarily, and that's what he used that administrative assistant for, was to take notes during meetings or to be able to provide him with information. Okay, so what they did is they actually set up a team. It's a team of two, okay? That executive and that admin. The admin actually went to work from home for 4 days a week and was in the office 1 day because had no reason to be in the office when the executive wasn't there. So they would plan on, she managed his calendar, so she knew when he was going to be in the office and said, hey, I don't need to be there, he's not here. Okay? But yet have that seamless conversation with her being on her computer and him being on a mobile. Okay? And yet being able to get to everything right from with the Teams mobile app. Right? Plus having those conversations. Hey, can you make sure this is done? Hey, can you take those meeting notes and pin them to by OneNote and all of these types of things. Okay? So that administrative assistant actually became more productive, happier, 'cause she's working from home, right? And being able to do that all through Microsoft Teams in that collaborative environment. Right? So really, really kind of cool stuff there. So some things to do there. Set up a team with an executive and the administrative assistant. Okay? Use persistent chat to be able to communicate with each other anywhere at any time. Right? Didn't matter if that executive was traveling and it was 3 in the morning in New York or whatever the case may be. It was, hey, I can get to that person at any time of day simply by using that mobile. Share files, share presentations or other materials as needed, and then create a OneNote notebook between the two of them. Set up that OneNote notebook, because that administrative assistant, whether the executive was in the office or not, she was on every single call, every single meeting that he was in, and able to take notes. Okay. So open up that OneNote notebook for any of those meeting notes or memos. All right. The last one that I have is actually something that I just finished working with, and it was very much of a test pilot. So I work as a instructional designer. I'm really an adjunct professor for a college university in the small little town of Rochester, Minnesota. Anybody know what's in Rochester, Minnesota? Mayo Clinic, yes. So most of my students are from the Mayo Clinic. I actually teach project management and business analysis at the small college, Rochester Technical and Community College, and teach a lot of Mayo Clinic students, adult students, project management and business analysis. Okay, so we switched up kind of the whole entire class this year. There's an online portion of the class that you can take to become a certified project manager, and then there's a in-classroom based on different learning styles. Okay, so we made that into kind of a hybrid course people would take the online learning module, the really boring stuff, okay, listening to the videos of somebody drone on and talk and talk and talk, right, clicking a few links, all of those kinds of things. All right, think of your compliance videos that you have to have in your organization. Yeah, that's the boring material that I kind of write, okay? But what we did is when we had the classroom stuff, I still wanted to make sure that they were connected even outside of the classroom while they were working on some of those materials. So I said, hey, why don't we set up a team, a Microsoft team, and I'll invite you to everybody to this team, and you know, how if it morphs into additional channels, if it changes over time, if you have requests, we can put them right out here, right? And especially if you've got questions about something that you learned in the online, please post it out here so that we can have a conversation around it, and so that when others have that same question, they can see exactly what has been asked already. Because maybe they've, you know, have the information available to them and just need to see and go and look for it. So what we did is we set up the spring 2019 team, and all I have is just a general channel. I left it intentionally very, very basic because these people did not know Teams at all, had never worked with it, okay? And even though they were, you know, working on projects, that type of thing, they didn't have it in Mayo Clinic. So it was kind of a brand new journey for them, right? So what we did is we just set up the general channel. Everything went under that general. Something that I maybe wouldn't recommend if we get, you know, more mature and we know kind of what channels we need. Maybe I would set it up for each of the individual modules. Okay, so we can have a continuous conversation around each of the individual modules. The weeks that we were focusing on what work. Okay, so that there was a separation between the questions for cost management versus the questions for resource management. Right? But we didn't do it that way. Again, it was a pilot class. We wanted to throw some new tools out there and see what stuck. Right? So I would post things like the slide deck for the materials that were, you know, brand new for that week that we had covered. So they'd have all of the slide deck materials from which to study from. I'd post questions of the day. Okay, I tried posting just different questions that were additional test questions. And they could have a conversation about, you know, what the answer was. Right? And they weren't questions that you could just Google. Okay, or Bing, those questions. So it was a little bit kind of, okay, let's see what works. And I threw a lot of, like, you know, throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. And some of it did, some of it didn't, okay? That's what makes Teams so much fun to work with, is that it's very agile. It can be adaptive. You can change it up, okay? As soon as you fail, just change it up a little bit and see what works again. All right? So I had the general chat areas, but I also would post all of the different materials. And I actually had a request through Teams from a gal in the class. She said, hey, Liz, I need some more questions around risk. I'm really struggling with risk. Can you post a bunch of different questions around risk that weren't questions that we had already gone over in class? I said, sure. And I pulled out my database of questions, got some new questions, put it into a Word document, and had some risk questions that were available for anybody that wanted to look at that. They weren't tested on it. They were simply asked for additional documentation, additional questions around that, and I provided it to them. Okay? So some interesting cases there around how to use Microsoft Teams. All right, did I answer the first question around, like, you know, how do you get started in this? Got some good examples there now? Okay? Okay. What questions do you guys have? Or how are you going to use Teams? I'm going to go here, then there.
Do you have to have a certain type of license to use Teams, or do you just have to have a Microsoft account? students, for example, they just signed up for a Microsoft account, they were able to get in, download the client.
Yeah. So my students, I'm actually on like an education license for Microsoft Teams for the college university. It's a little bit different. There's different functionality. So I can actually post class assignments out to my Microsoft Teams within the education version. And that's a little bit different than your enterprise versions. Yeah. They just need a Microsoft account. Yep, they're just just having a Microsoft account. So I could add my personal email to this that is not even associated with Microsoft or Office 365 at all. So just having a Microsoft account, you can add them as a guest. Okay. All right. Question here.
Everything that you upload, all the files, are they stored in SharePoint or OneDrive, or where are they?
Yeah, great question. So the question is, where are the files stored? When we saw files up there, where are they stored? Okay, so great question. I'm going to go back one slide. The files here are actually stored in SharePoint. Okay, we can see that. We can actually open it up in SharePoint if we wanted to. All of those files are available in SharePoint. Okay, when we're having conversations one-on-one, I'm going to use her. What's your name?
Cindy.
Cindy and I are having a conversation. We're going back and forth. And I said, hey, wait a minute. Let me send you this file. I'm going to share it with you. That's in OneDrive. Okay, so a little bit of a different place based on how I'm wanting to share. Okay, all essentially in SharePoint on the back end, however. Okay, where are the conversations stored? That persistent chat that I'm doing, where is that stored? Exchange. Yep, Outlook. You can see it in Outlook, but yeah, it's actually in the back end is Exchange. Okay, so all of those conversations is stored in Exchange around that. Okay? Did that answer your question? All good?
Yes.
Awesome. All right. I had a hand back here. Question?
Yeah, so you create all of these teams and projects. That's going to create a lot of data silos because each project will have their own files and their own SharePoint backend sites. But do you deal with this at the end of each project? You have a shutdown phase where then they take the artifacts and move them to other places in SharePoint so people could actually access the documents across the organization. Is that what you do?
Okay, so I think we had kind of two questions there. So we talk about data silos. Let me answer the data silos one, and then you also had a question around like how to archive, basically, right? So I'll answer that one second. In terms of the data silos, yeah, all of that kind of, you setting up team after team after team almost creates some silos. And, as a project manager and someone that's worked in project management and part of that, PMO greater office for a long period of time in my life, I want to have the visibility into a lot of those areas, but not necessarily having to switch teams all the time. So what I might do is I might use some of those connectors, those tabs at the top, to link into some of those other SharePoint areas. Okay, so I can see what other documents that have been stored in different locations so that I don't feel so siloed anymore, okay? The other thing that you asked about was how do I archive the process at the end and essentially shut down the team? And it really depends. It depends on how long you want to keep some of those assets, how long maybe that project's still valid and we do it year over year, okay? And then I have a little bit of a different setup for those projects. But yes, there should be at some point in time where, gosh, I don't need these resources anymore. Let's not only shut down the team, but let's shut down the SharePoint or move that SharePoint information into an archive area. Or have things like our data loss prevention, DLP, policies turned on so that I keep it for a number of years and I don't really have to think about it because DLP will take care of that deletion and archiving process for me. Okay? So that might be some of the governance type of items that you deal with.
The question's a little different.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So you have a project, let's just keep something real simple. So you have a development project and it goes through and develops something.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that are specifications, marketing documents and things. sales, support, other people in the organization later on that are going to live for years and years and years on outside of a project.
Outside of a
Right,
project,
so I'm
okay?
assuming what you do is at some point is maybe you've set up on your intranet or someplace else some SharePoint libraries where you've taken those marketing assets, those technical assets, and moved them out so other teams, not a member of the original project, can continue to access. Is that what you're doing? Is that what
Yeah, instead of adding them to the team because the team's essentially done.
everybody in the company's going to have 700 teams after 5 years?
Yeah, so it's still on SharePoint in the back end of that. So we can, change out those SharePoint controls and, make different set of security and give those access to that. But I would probably look at it as, okay, those assets that we developed, those, deliverables, they might be moved into, like, say, a marketing area that's still available on SharePoint that a greater community of the company has access to. So that would just be how I would work with it and, kind of leave the team out there for something else. Yeah, you could also tag them. So the comment around that is to be able to tag it with some metadata. So the search functionality works a little bit different. It just depends on if you have a public team that's open to be able to see and have the search functionality work, or if you have a private team, okay? So I'm gonna go over to this side. Yes, you.
Good presentation.
Thank you.
We've been using Teams for quite a bit now. We have a pilot that's grown beyond really a pilot. It's like 400 users and 64 teams right now.
Oh, so you're right in the implementation.
It's not a pilot. An issue holding us back enough is the fact that people confuse chat and conversations. And we at our products want to eliminate some of the chat seems to be like workflow talk for our risk folks. And they want to be able to take chat and make it very short duration. Like maybe take chat and say, you only live for a day or two.
Okay.
And right now, you can only, the shortest amount of time is 30 days.
Yeah.
So you have 30 days, you're going, the lifespan of that chat has to be 30 days at its, at its minimum. So we're wondering if there's a way, maybe use your voice or something like that to say, you want to be able to build out chat to say a day or two as opposed to conversations. Any techniques you have in trying to train users or any advice you have to say, hey, your conversations that are longer lived here and chat should be like one-to-one.
Do they manage it the same way in Exchange?
Yeah, we actually, with instant messaging, we do have it. It's immediate.
Okay, you don't keep any of those, okay. Okay. Yeah, so the question was around using chat, and they have a policy within their organization that says we only want to keep that chat for 1 day. And right now it's set at 30 days, so how do you, I'm sorry? Yep. Any lower. So how do you work around that? I don't have any techniques for you. I can take it back to some of the Teams people and check with Caruana. Maybe they have something on the roadmap, but I'm not aware of like something that they're working on as far as cutting that down. Most people want to keep it longer. So yeah. Yep. All right, I'm going to go up to here. Get this side of the room as well. Yes, question.
So, I've got 25 projects that are out, and I've got multiple conversations happening, people wanting responses and stuff. How do I keep myself from going insane and organized so that I'm not missing things, or just all I'm doing all day is responding to conversations? What does that look like in Teams?
Yeah, so the question is around, I've got so many teams now, how do I keep it organized and keep my focus on exactly where I am in my teams and being able to answer that question within that team without getting, notifications popping up all of the time, especially if I'm in like, a presentation or something and you get these notifications that pop up of everybody wants you. A couple of things that I do is I actually hide some of my teams if I'm not working with them or I haven't been active in them in a while. And even at Microsoft, we've got some great communities, but guess what? if there's something important, they'll use my @mention for me. Okay, if they want my attention, use that @mention and really kind of educate the people in your company to use that @mention feature, because then I don't have to be bothered by that. Okay, so I tend to hide some of those teams because I don't want to see all the chatter on it. All right, if they need me, @mention me, I'll get an email on it, I'll take a look at it, open it up differently. So I've got kind of my top 10 of the teams that I work in quite often throughout the day. My top is actually my pod team. Okay, and then I've got a few customer teams and those sorts of things, some extended teams, but some of that community-driven stuff that I'm, automatically added to, a member of, I just, it's great stuff, it's great information, but let me self-serve it, and I might go and open that up when I need to look for something additional, okay? Yes, question?
Especially in classrooms, like, I want to go to my other camera that is a projector so I can make my notes. Is it easy from there? Like, I'm comparing it to Zoom, see if it can replace Zoom.
I've used Zoom a couple of times. I'm not really familiar with that. I'm not sure in terms of the camera stuff that you're asking.
Right, like you have your facing camera, then I want
Yep.
to switch to a different camera that I have. When I'm presenting something I'm writing on the board or something.
Okay, yeah, I'm not sure. I've never tested that.
Okay.
If there's other people that have tested it, maybe you can network with somebody else, but I have not tested the, switching from one camera to another and how seamless that is. Okay. Yes, question here.
Can we add another SharePoint site that is not part of this?
Yeah, so what I could do, the question is, can I add another SharePoint site that is not part of this? So you see this little plus sign right here? That allows me to see all of the apps that are available, okay? And one of them is a SharePoint site. And all I need to put it in is the URL, and boom, I have all of the information that's in that SharePoint site. So I can connect to a different library, I can connect to another list, I can connect to, all sorts of different things that are outside of this team site and SharePoint site that's already set up.
What if I'm using third-party tool to render my forms? Will that be seamless here?
So if it's a third party, it just depends on if you have it as a browser-based. I'm assuming, yes, it is a browser-based. Most products are nowadays. So anything that has a URL, another app is the ability to add in that URL, so any URL, and be able to add that into that particular tab that's on the top. So similar to how it works in SharePoint, just as a worldwide URL.
Last question, retention. Can I manage my retention on messages, instant messages?
Your retention is actually on the Exchange side for your messages.
I can say,
Yep.
like, delete anything over the
Your retention's all on, it's not necessarily within Teams, it's all on the Exchange side because that's where all of that conversation is stored.
But I heard
Okay?
that you can do it in Teams admin side. Well, I heard that, but I don't know if it's
Yeah, the Exchange side is managing that. Okay? All right, so just a couple of other things. I'm going to cut the questions. I will be around for a little bit, but fast track resources. Under Microsoft Teams, there's a lot of information out there. They've got some great communications, posters, templates, all of those types of things. So as you're getting ready to either do a pilot, do an implementation of Microsoft Teams, look to the fast track resources because there's a lot of great pieces of information out there that can just start your journey right away for you. Okay? All righty. I'll leave the fast track resources up. Pictures being taken of it. So thank you. Have a great rest of your conference, and we'll see you next year.